was an early morning with some tired eyes, but we had to hit the ground running to get the car packed up and the road trip started.
Hey, Kyle.
Yeah.
This is your GPS to use in your car. If you're driving the van, and here's your crabunga.
Before we hit the road, we always are sure to pray as a family for traveling mercies.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay.
Our first stop is Toledo. We should get there about 12:15.
Okay.
4.5 hours.
You can do it.
Okay, baby. We'll get the call.
Well, that was the beginning of our trip, and it was wonderful. But one of the things, Mitch, that surprised me when we got there is the first time was this fabulous World War II museum. It is and was the second largest museum in the world, next to the Smithsonian. Tell us about that real quickly before we get to Restoration Road.
Well, right before eBay popped out of the sky and made a pathway for me to go a different direction, I had been in Europe with my dad. We had some auctions there, and on a trip after an auction, Dad had stumbled upon this incredible World War II museum, and the owner was going to dispose of it at some point. And I had been in the works of brokering it to a collector in the United States who would auction what he didn't want. And we thought that he could auction enough proceeds to probably cover his entire cost and then have the remainder for his own private museum. Well, right after we did the eBay transaction, we created a nonprofit organization, and that nonprofit corporation acquired those tanks and all those military vehicles. And we learned in a post 9/11 world that you just can't import tanks to the United States. So a lot of hurdles. There was a man involved that spent a lot of time in that and took almost a year and a half to get everything over. And it's really quite a museum.
And you need to go there. You can imagine my very pleasant surprise, because I believe in divine appointments with all my heart, to find out after our first trip that the Cruz family loves the Lord very, very deeply. In fact, have been involved with the Church of God for a number of years. And Mitch actually is a minister. And so I was even more excited about that. And then to find out that he has written this marvelous book called Restoration Road, which is more than a book. And that's when I want to bring in Derek. Derek, how did you get involved with this crazy Cruz family?
Well, I have the same hairline, so that's probably a good start.
Fit right in.
Mitch and I met each other about 9 years ago. I was producing a tour for a Christian artist, and we came through Indiana with Mitch, and he was volunteering at a church there. And so we did the concert, and I'm a huge car fanatic. So I was talking to Mitch, and I'm just like...
And you didn't know who he was at that point.
I had no idea, and I'm like, so are there any cars we can go see? And he goes, I'll pick you up in the morning. So the next day, we went to the Auburn Court Duesenberg Museum. We went to the Cruz Auction Park, and long story short, I was blown away, and it took me a while to put two and two together, like, oh, this is what you do. So I knew it had to be a God appointment if there were cars and
there you go.
Bald heads involved. So.
Absolutely.
Derek, you are a missionary's child, and you've been very heavily involved in missions and have a great heart for that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Hong Kong. Parents are missionaries there till probably the mid-'80s, and they were there for about 20 years. And so I have the missionary DNA, I guess. For about 12 years, the artists I worked with, we would travel overseas to Africa and in Asia and do outreaches. We were able to raise support to feed kids, put kids into schools. And so a couple of years ago, I was able to take Mitch over there, and we filmed a 30-minute film where we captured the stories of kids that live in a city dump there. About 14,000 families live in a dump, and we've been working with them for a while. So I took Mitch there, we grabbed the stories of the kids, and we're able to kind of have Mitch host the DVD, which was awesome. And it's kind of developed from there. We came home, and the more we talked, I told Mitch, I think there's something to your story, and and the lessons that he learned along the way.
Before we get to that, though, I want to encourage people to go to ForgottenStories.org, because you have some of those segments on your website, ForgottenStories.org, and you can see actually these children who many in the world have forgotten, but God has never forgotten. Beloved, God has never forgotten, and he won't forget. So go and take a look. It's ForgottenStories.com. Well, Restoration Road, I've read it. I love it. How did it come about, Mitch?
Well,
You got to tell your own story, because you were restored.
exactly. I grew up going to church 3 times a week in that country Church of God, County Line Church of God church, just a half mile down from my house where I grew up. And when I was 9 years old, in the summertime, oftentimes the building would be empty, but it would be unlocked. And I walked down to the church and opened the door, went into the sanctuary, and made my way up to the altar. And alone there in that church with just God and me, I got on my knees and I said, "Hey, God, what do you want me to do with my life?" And I sensed his presence, and I sensed that he wanted to do something with my life. But I also, as an understanding that I was a perfectionist as a kid, and now I'm a recovering perfectionist, I think I took control of my own life. I mean, that same year I was baptized, and I prayed to surrender my life to Christ. But I think the risk of anyone who takes his faith seriously is that he can develop what I call a stone heart, and that is making it all about me. God's going to do what I want him to do for me. And in essence, that's legalism, and it takes a severe tool to be shaped. Well, I grew up in that auction business, and my dad had a financial problem about the time I entered college and was deciding what I was going to do with my life. And I created a new corporation my senior year in college, and it was soon after I had sold that car for $1 million. And we created a new company, and it was amazing the success that we had in the auction business. But after about around a decade in the marketplace, I realized that I developed a sand heart, kind of like the prodigal in Jesus' parable of the 2 sons. And I'd become about what I would say is the horizontal. If the verticals are a connection with God, the horizontals are connection with people and the things that we want out of that. And I had a sand heart, and really sand is just crumbled up pieces of stone. Both stone and sand hearts determine for themselves what's right, which is probably the knowledge of good and evil. I'll determine for myself what's right. And sand, in the end of the day, is just crumbled up pieces of stone. We still have our own set of rules and regulations, and it takes a storm to be shaped.
Before we get to the storm, we need to take a break. But I really want you to hear this story. I've heard it. It's a fabulous story. And beloved, it relates to you and to me. We'll be right back.
Wow.